Leon Trotsky, for a workers' united front against fascism. December 1931. Written in exile in Turkey, December 8, 1931. Bulletin of the Opposition, number 27, March 1932. Translation by Morris Lewitt with slight variations in the Militant. Volume 5, number 2, whole number 98. January 9, 1932. Pages 1 and 4. Trotsky's own title was What's Wrong with the Current Policy of the German Communist Party? Germany is now passing through one of those great historic hours upon which the fate of the German people, the fate of Europe, and in significant measure the fate of all humanity, will depend for decades. If you place a ball on top of a pyramid, the slightest impact can cause it to roll down either to the left or to the right. That is the situation approaching with every hour in Germany today. There are forces which would like the bale to roll down towards the right and break the back of the working class. There are forces which would like the ball to remain at the top. That is a utopia. The ball cannot remain at the top of the pyramid. The communists want the ball to roll down toward the left and break the back of capitalism. But it is not enough to want. One must know how. Let us calmly reflect once more. Is the policy carried on at present by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Germany correct or incorrect? What does Hitler want? The fascists are growing very rapidly. The communists are also growing but much more slowly. The growth at the extreme poles shows that the ball cannot maintain itself at the top of the pyramid. The rapid growth of the fascists signifies the danger that the ball may roll down toward the right. Therein lies an enormous danger. Hitler emphasizes that he is against a coup d'état. In order to strangle democracy once and for all, he wants to come to power by no other route than the democratic road. Can we seriously believe this? Of course, if the fascists could figure on obtaining an absolute majority of the votes at the next elections in a peaceful way, then they would perhaps even prefer this road. In reality, however, this road is unthinkable for them. It is stupid to believe that the Nazis would grow uninterruptedly, as they do now, for an unlimited period of time. Sooner or later, they will drain their social reservoir. Fascism has introduced into its own ranks such terrific contradictions that the moment must come in which the flow ceases to replace the ebb. This moment can arrive long before the fascists have united about them even half of the votes. They will not be able to halt, for they will have nothing more to look for here. They will be forced to resort to an overturn. But even apart from all this, the fascists are cut off from the democratic road. The immense growth of the political contradictions in the country, the stark brigands' agitation of the fascists, will inevitably lead to a situation in which the closer the fascists approach a majority, the more heated the atmosphere will become and the more extensive the unfolding of the conflicts and struggles will be. With this perspective, civil war is absolutely inevitable. Consequently, the question of the seizure of power by the fascists will not be decided by vote, but by civil war, which the fascists are preparing and provoking. Can we assume even for 1 minute that Hitler and his counselors do not realize and foresee this? That would mean to consider them blockheads. There is no greater crime in politics than that of hoping for stupidities on the part of a strong enemy. But if Hitler is not unaware that the road to power leads through the most gruesome civil war, then it means that his speeches about the peaceful democratic road are only a cloak, that is, a stratagem. In that case, it is all the more necessary to keep one's eyes open. What is concealed behind Hitler's stratagem? His calculations are quite simple and obvious. He wants to lull his antagonists with the long-run perspective of the parliamentary growth of the Nazis in order to catch them napping and to deal them a death blow at the right moment. It is quite possible that Hitler's courtesies to democratic parliamentarism may, moreover, help to set up some sort of coalition in the immediate future in which the fascists will obtain the most important posts and employ them in turn for their coup d'état. For it is entirely clear that the coalition, let us assume, between the center and the fascists will not be a stage in the democratic solution of the question, but a step closer to the coup d'état under conditions most favorable to the fascists. We must plan according to the shorter perspective. All this means that even independently of the desires of the fascist general staff, the solution can intervene in the course of the next few months, if not weeks. This circumstance is of tremendous importance in elaborating a correct policy. If we allow the fascists to seize power in 2 or 3 months, then the struggle against them next year will be much harder than in this. All revolutionary plans laid out for 2, 3, or 5 years in advance will prove to be only wretched and disgraceful twaddle, if the working class allows the fascists to gain power in the course of the next 2, 3, or 5 months. In the polity of revolutionary crises, the calculation of time is of just as decisive importance as it is in war operations. Let us take another, more remote example for the clarification of our idea. Hugo Abans, who considers himself a left communist, declares the German party bankrupt, politically done for, and proposes to create a new party. If Abans were right, it would mean that the victory of the fascists is certain. For, in order to create a new party, years are required, and there has been nothing to prove that the party of Abans would in any sense be better than Thalmann's party. When Abans was at the head of the party, there were by no means fewer mistakes. Yes, should the fascists really conquer power, that would mean not only the physical destruction of the Communist Party, but veritable political bankruptcy for it. An ignominious defeat in a struggle against bands of human rubbish would never be forgiven the Communist International and its German section by the many million German proletariat. The seizure of power by the fascists would therefore most probably signify the necessity of creating a new revolutionary party, and in all likelihood also a new international. That would be a frightful historical catastrophe. But to assume today that all this is unavoidable can be done only by genuine liquidators, those who under the mantle of hollow phrases are really hastening to capitulate like cravens in the face of the struggle and without a struggle. With this conception, we Bolshevik-Leninists, who are called Trotskyists by the Stalinists, have nothing in common. We are unshakably convinced that the victory over the fascists is possible, not after their coming to power, not after 5, 10, or 20 years of their rule, but now, under the given conditions, in the coming months and weeks. Thalmann considers the victory of fascism inevitable. A correct policy is necessary in order to achieve victory. That is, we need a policy appropriate to the present situation, to the present relationship of forces, and not to the situation that may develop in 1, 2, or 3 years, when the question of power will already have been decided for a long time. The whole misfortune lies in the fact that the policy of the Central Committee of the German Communist Party, in part consciously and in part unconsciously, proceeds from the recognition of the inevitability of a fascist victory. In fact, in the appeal for the Red United Front, published on November 29, 1931, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Germany proceeds from the idea that it is impossible to defeat fascism without first defeating the social democracy. The same idea is repeated in all possible shades in Thalmann's article. Is this idea correct? On the historical scale, it is unconditionally correct. But that does not at all mean that with its aid, that is, by simple repetition, one can solve the questions of the day. An idea, correct from the point of view of revolutionary strategy as a whole, is converted into a lie and at that into a reactionary lie, if it is not translated into the language of tactics. Is it correct that, in order to destroy unemployment and misery, it is first necessary to destroy capitalism? It is correct. But only the biggest blockhead can conclude from all this that we do not have to fight this very day, with all of our forces, against the measures with whose aid capitalism is increasing the misery of the workers. Can we expect that, in the course of the next few months, the Communist Party will defeat both the social democracy and fascism? No normal-thinking person who can read and calculate would risk such a contention. Politically, the question stands like this: can we successfully repel fascism now, in the course of the next few months, that is, with the existence of a greatly weakened but still, unfortunately, very strong social democracy? The Central Committee replies in the negative. In other words, Thalmann considers the victory of fascism inevitable. Once again, the Russian experience. In order to express my thought as clearly and as concretely as possible, I will come back once more to the experience with the Kornilov uprising. On August 26, Old Style, 1917, General Kornilov led his Cossack Corps and one irregular division against Petrograd. At the helm of power stood Kerensky, lackey of the bourgeoisie and three-quarters a confederate of Kornilov. Lenin was still in hiding because of the accusation that he was in the service of the Hohenzollerns. For the same accusation, I was at that time incarcerated in solitary confinement in Kresty prison. How did the Bolsheviks proceed in this question? They also had a right to say, in order to defeat the Korniloviad, we must first defeat the Kerenskiad. They said this more than once, for it was correct and necessary for all the subsequent propaganda. but that was entirely inadequate for offering resistance to Kornilov on August 26th, and on the days that followed, and for preventing him from butchering the Petrograd proletariat. That is why the Bolsheviks did not content themselves with a general appeal to the workers and soldiers to break with the conciliators and to support the Red United Front of the Bolsheviks. No, the Bolsheviks proposed the United Front struggle to the Mensheviks and the Social Revolutionaries and created together with them joint organizations of struggle. Was this correct or incorrect? Let Thalmann answer that. In order to show even more vividly how matters stood with the United Front, I will cite the following incident. Immediately upon my release after the trade unions had put up bail for me, I went directly to the Committee for National Defense, where I discussed and adopted decisions regarding the struggle against Kornilov with the Menshevik Dan and the Social Revolutionary Gots, two allies of Kerensky who had kept me in prison. Was this right or wrong? Let Rommeli answer that. Is Brüning the lesser evil? The social democracy supports Brüning, votes for him, assumes responsibility for him before the masses on the grounds that the Brüning government is the lesser evil. Die wrote Fon attempts to ascribe the same view to me on the grounds that I express myself against the stupid and shameful participation of the communists in the Hitler referendum. But have the German left opposition and myself in particular demanded that the communists vote for and support Brüning? We Marxists regard Brüning and Hitler, Braun included, as component parts of one and the same system. The question as to which one of them is the lesser evil has no sense, for the system we are fighting against needs all these elements. But these elements are momentarily involved in conflicts with one another, and the party of the proletariat must take advantage of these conflicts in the interest of the revolution. There are 7 keys in the musical scale. The question as to which of these keys is better, do, re, or sol, is a nonsensical question. But the musician must know when to strike and what keys to strike. The abstract question of who is the lesser evil, Brüning or Hitler, is just as nonsensical. It is necessary to know which of these keys to strike. Is that clear? For the feeble-minded, let us cite another example. When one of my enemies sets before me small daily portions of poison and the second, on the other hand, is about to shoot straight at me, then I will first knock the revolver out of the hand of my second enemy, for this gives me an opportunity to get rid of my first enemy. But that does not at all mean that the poison is a lesser evil in comparison with the revolver. The misfortune consists precisely of the fact that the leaders of the German Communist Party have placed themselves on the same ground as the social democracy, only with inverted prefixes. The social democracy votes for Brüning, recognizing in him the lesser evil. The communists, on the other hand, who refuse to trust either Braun or Brüning in any way, and that is absolutely the right way to act, go into the streets to support Hitler's referendum, that is, the attempt of the fascists to overthrow Brüning. But by this they themselves have recognized in Hitler the lesser evil, for the victory of the referendum would not have brought the proletariat into power, but Hitler. To be sure, it is painful to have to argue over such ABC questions. It is sad, very sad indeed, when musicians like Rommeli, instead of distinguishing between the keys, stamp with their boots on the keyboard. It is not a question of the workers who have already left the social democracy, but of those who still remain with it. The thousands upon thousands of Nosks, Welses, and Hilferdings prefer, in the last analysis, fascism to communism. 3. But for that they must once and for all tear themselves loose from the workers. Today this is not yet the case. Today the social democracy as a whole, with all its internal antagonisms, is forced into sharp conflict with the fascists. It is our task to take advantage of this conflict and not to unite the antagonists against us. The front must now be directed against fascism. And this common front of direct struggle against fascism, embracing the entire proletariat, must be utilized in the struggle against the social democracy, directed as a flank attack, but no less effective for all that. It is necessary to show by deeds a complete readiness to make a block with the Social Democrats against the fascists in all cases in which they will accept a block. To say to the Social Democratic workers, cast your leaders aside and join our non-party united front, means to add just one more hollow phrase to 1,000 others. We must understand how to tear the workers away from their leaders in reality. But reality today is the struggle against fascism. There are and doubtless will be social democratic workers who are prepared to fight hand in hand with the communist workers against the fascists, regardless of the desires or even against the desires of the social democratic organizations. With such progressive elements, it is obviously necessary to establish the closest possible contact. At the present time, however, they are not great in number. The German worker has been raised in the spirit of organization and of discipline. This has its strong as well as its weak sides. The overwhelming majority of the social democratic workers will fight against the fascists, but, for the present at least, only together with their organizations. This stage cannot be skipped. We must help the social democratic workers in action, in this new and extraordinary situation, to test the value of their organizations and leaders at this time, when it is a matter of life and death for the working class. We must force the social democracy into a bloc against the fascists. The trouble is that in the Central Committee of the Communist Party there are many frightened opportunists. They have heard that opportunism consists of a love for blocs, and that is why they are against blocs. They do not understand the difference between, let us say, a parliamentary agreement and an ever so modest agreement for struggle in a strike or in defense of workers' print shops against fascist bans. Election agreements, parliamentary compromises concluded between the Revolutionary Party and the Social Democracy serve, as a rule, to the advantage of the social democracy. Practical agreements for mass action, for purposes of struggle, are always useful to the Revolutionary Party. The Anglo-Russian Committee was an impermissible type of bloc of two leaderships on one common political platform, vague, deceptive, binding no one to any action at all. The maintenance of this bloc at the time of the British general strike, when the General Council assumed the role of strikebreaker, signified on the part of the Stalinists a policy of betrayal. For no common platform with the social democracy, or with the leaders of the German trade unions, no common publications, banners, placards, march separately but strike together, agree only how to strike, whom to strike, and when to strike. Such an agreement can be concluded even with the devil himself, with his grandmother, and even with Noski and Grzezinski. 5. On one condition, not to bind one's hands. It is necessary, without any delay, finally to elaborate a practical system of measures, not with the aim of merely exposing the social democracy before the communists, but with the aim of actual struggle against fascism. The question of factory defense organizations, of unhampered activity on the part of the factory councils, the inviolability of the workers' organizations and institutions, the question of arsenals that may be seized by the fascists, the question of measures in the case of an emergency, that is, of the coordination of the actions of the communist and the social democratic divisions in the struggle, etc., etc., must be dealt with in this program. In the struggle against fascism, the factory councils occupy a tremendously important position. Here, a particularly precise program of action is necessary. Every factory must become an anti-fascist bulwark, with its own commandants and its own battalions. It is necessary to have a map of the fascist barracks and all other fascist strongholds. In every city and in every district the fascists are attempting to encircle the revolutionary strongholds. The encirclers must be encircled. On this basis, an agreement with the social democratic and trade union organizations is not only permissible but a duty. To reject this for reasons of principle, in reality because of bureaucratic stupidity, or what is still worse, because of cowardice, is to give direct and immediate aid to fascism. A practical program of agreements with the social democratic workers was proposed by us as far back as September 1930, the turn in the Comintern in the German situation, that is, a year and a quarter ago. What has the leadership undertaken in this direction? Next to nothing. The Central Committee of the Communist Party has taken up everything except that which constitutes its direct task. How much valuable, irretrievable time has been lost. As a matter of fact, not much time is left. The program of action must be strictly practical, strictly objective, to the point, without any of those artificial claims, without any reservations, so that every average social democratic worker can say to himself, what the communists propose is completely indispensable for the struggle against fascism. On this basis, we must pull the social democratic workers along with us by our example, and criticize their leaders who will inevitably serve as a check and a brake. Only in this way is victory possible. A good quotation from Lenin. The present-day epigones, that is, the thoroughly bad disciples of Lenin, like to cover up their shortcomings on every occasion that offers itself with quotations often entirely irrelevant. For Marxists, the question is not decided by a quotation, but by means of the correct method. If one is guided by correct methods, It is not hard also to find suitable quotations. After I had drawn the above analogy with the Kornilov insurrection, I said to myself, we can probably find a theoretical elucidation of our bloc with the conciliators in the struggle against Kornilov in Lenin. And here is what I actually found in the second part of volume 14 of the Russian edition, in a letter from Lenin to the Central Committee, written at the beginning of September 1917. Even at the present time, we are not duty-bound to support the Kerensky government that would be unprincipled. It is asked, then we are not to fight against Kornilov? Of course we are. But that is not one and the same thing. There is a limit to this. It is being transgressed by many Bolsheviks who fail into conciliationism and allow themselves to be driven by the current of events. We shall fight, we are fighting against Kornilov, but we do not support Kerensky. We are uncovering his weaknesses. The distinction is rather delicate, but highly important and must not be forgotten. What does the change of our tactics consist of after the Kornilov insurrection? In this, that we are varying the forms of struggle against Kerensky, without diminishing our hostility to him even by one single note, without taking back one word from what we have said against him, without giving up the task of overthrowing Kerensky, we say we must calculate the moment. We will not overthrow Kerensky at present. We approach the question of the struggle against him differently, by explaining the weaknesses and vacillations of Kerensky to the people who are fighting against Kornilov. We are proposing nothing different. Complete independence of the communist organization and press, complete freedom of communist criticism, the same for the social democracy and the trade unions. Only contemptible opportunists can allow the freedom of the Communist Party to be limited, for example, as in the entrance into the Kuomintang. We are not of their number. No retraction of our criticism of the social democracy. No forgetting of all that has been. The whole historical reckoning, including the reckoning for Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg VI, will be presented at the proper time, just as the Russian Bolsheviks finally presented a general reckoning to the Mensheviks and social revolutionaries for the baiting, calumny, imprisonment and murder of workers, soldiers, and peasants. But we presented our general reckoning to them 2 months after we had utilized the partial reckoning between Kerensky and Kornilov, between the Democrats and the fascists, in order to drive back the fascists all the more certainly. Only thanks to this circumstance were we victorious. When the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Germany adopts the position expressed in the quotation from Lenin cited above, the entire approach to the social democratic masses and the trade union organizations will change at once. Instead of the articles and speeches which are convincing only to those people who are already convinced without them, the agitators will find a common language with new hundreds of thousands and millions of workers. The differentiation within the social democracy will proceed at an increased pace. The fascists will soon feel that their task does not at all consist merely of defeating Brüning, Braun, and Wells, but of taking up the open struggle against the whole working class. On this plane, a profound differentiation will inevitably be produced within fascism. Only by this road is victory possible. But it is necessary to desire this victory. In the meantime, there are among the communist officials not a few cowardly careerists and fakers whose little posts, whose incomes, and more than that, whose hides are dear to them. These creatures are very much inclined to spout ultra-radical phrases beneath which is concealed a wretched and contemptible fatalism. Without a victory over the social democracy, we cannot battle against fascism, say such terrible revolutionists, and for this reason, they get their passports ready. Worker communists, you are hundreds of thousands, millions. You cannot leave for any place. There are not enough passports for you. Should fascism come to power, it will ride over your skulls and spines like a terrific tank. Your salvation lies in merciless struggle. And only a fighting unity with the social democratic workers can bring victory. Make haste, worker communists, you have very little time left.